Why World Ventilate Day? Why not World Air Quality Day? We're talking about ventilation when there's so much focus on air quality.
The reason we focused on ventilation is it's action driven. There's a lot of events around clean air, but that's quite a nuanced conversation in terms of having a focal point of a day within the year where we can focus messaging and outputs around it. Having it action based in terms of ventilation made a lot of sense to us.
I think the other important thing about ventilation, Simon, is that it's not just about air quality. Air quality is one piece around ventilation, but ventilation is also critically important for managing the thermal environment in your building, managing the humidity in your building, managing comfort, managing energy as well. And I think if we just focus on air quality, we miss some of that bigger picture that's necessary when we think about how do we solve problems in buildings.
Why you three and World Ventilate Day? How did this start and why?
I mean, maybe I can take that. I think it actually came about by a chance conversation as much as anything. So Henry and I ran, and with other colleagues, ran a research network called Future Urban Ventilation Network for a number of years. And I believe I had a chance conversation with a colleague at BISA who'd set up World Refrigeration Day. And I kind of went, we ought to have something equivalent for ventilation. And it just kind of started from there because we went, well, that's a good idea. And it snowballed, and we're now into our 4th year of it, I believe. So we kind of, it was one of those things that we realised it was missing and that nobody had ever sort of championed it. And yet we have days for many, many other things. I guess the three of us, plus some other colleagues from BISA who've now moved on to do other things, were the kind of people who really grabbed it and said, let's try and make this happen.
When the idea came about, I mean, it doesn't take much to get me excited about work and ventilation and air quality and everything else. I was just like, we've got to make this happen. How do we make it happen? What do we need? What don't we need? And it's just wrapping everything in my daily life because I live ventilation. So I think knowing that we could open other people's eyes and other businesses that maybe not realise that what they do has an impact in some way on ventilation. And it's the way in which it sort of got that global appeal really quickly. The names that come forward without much hesitation was really, really welcoming. And it's just trying to make sure that momentum continues. We don't want this just to be sort of, it's off the back of COVID. People are talking about ventilation and air quality. We want to make sure that it's the longevity going forward. And it doesn't seem to be a day that goes past where people aren't talking about air quality, be that through ventilation systems, domestic settings, commercial settings. There's new standards coming through all the time, new laws being introduced that support what we're doing. It's just a way in which we can maintain this momentum.
And I remember, one of the sentiments I remember from you, Kath, back during the pandemic was, and I think you probably said this on the podcast we had way back, like a year or 2 years ago, it was around the question that the pandemic asked us was, well, one of the questions it asked us was, what do we know about the ventilation in our buildings? Where are we starting from to manage this risk? And the answer was resoundingly, we haven't got a effing clue. And I imagine that void, that lack of awareness was probably one of the sparks, I guess, for World Ventilate Day, was that, hang on a minute, like most spaces, this is not something that's considered or understood, or we don't have any level of expectation of effectiveness. It was a big black hole for a lot of buildings, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, the pandemic was a huge trigger in a sense for this, because I think it's the first time, awareness of air quality has been growing for a number of years, but I think the pandemic was the first time that ventilation became something mainstream for the public. It was something everybody was being asked to do. And, you know, it's the first time I've seen that much sort of media coverage, that much government focus, etc. on it. But you're right. I remember being asked by government officials, you know, how well are our buildings ventilated? And the answer is we just do not know. We know lots are poorly ventilated. And when you start digging, you find some great examples of really good stuff, but you find a heck of a lot of examples of inadequate ventilation, or just where it's ignored. You know, we have a vast number of naturally ventilated buildings and people just don't think about it. They just leave the windows shut. They are not aware. And I think the pandemic gave us a real reason for why ventilation mattered. But of course, ventilation goes well beyond just COVID transmission. It's something that matters to all aspects of our health and well-being.
This I think is one of the things that I take from World Ventilate is also pride in an industry as well, that ventilation is important. You should be proud to be involved in it. And a lot of what these days are about shouting from the rooftop, I care about ventilation, and that's what I do for a job. And it's one of the things I always remember you saying, Nathan, you know, if you're in an office and you see people coming in, engineers coming in to check the fire systems, people will come in during the workday. They're proud to do what they do. They do something that's a life safety system, you hope, you know, and people don't mind being disrupted for 5 or 10 minutes while somebody's going around making sure that you're protected and you're safe. When did you ever see a ventilation person coming around proud in the middle of the day, putting a ladder up and checking the flow rates of the air that's being delivered to the people in the office space? You know, there's an element here of this stuff's important and we should be noticed for what we do as an industry.